The city entered into a 3-year management agreement with Venue Works of Racine LLC for the continued management, operation, and marketing service of the Racine Civic Center. I'm reading from the agenda here. And that includes the Festival Hall and Memorial Hall. Now, it's interesting that this did not go out for bidding, Alderman, whereas the much smaller operation, which was the Oasis down at North Beach, went through this bidding process despite the fact that we had a very successful operation going on there, and this one's losing money. What's happening?
Well, I had that concern as well. So I actually attended the Finance and Personnel Committee, expressed my views in opposition to granting a sole source contract, and did the same on the council floor. My view of government purchasing is fairly simple. If we're going to use public dollars, we ought to ensure that we have the best and also the lowest bid. If you award a sole source contract, you have no assurance that that's the case, which is why nearly all contracts go through what's called an RFP process, which is a request for proposal. And what happens is our purchasing leader, Sam Aiello, will put together in concert with that department or board or committee a request for proposal and indicate what specifications need to be met in order to be a bidder on the contract. Now, this is a $70,000 a year contract. Compare that to the Oasis contract where we make $1,000 or $2,000 a year at most, and it certainly seems on the surface that we ought to be putting this contract out for bid. When the Oasis contract came up, that's in fact what happened. Went through the full bidding process. I was opposed to the award of that contract to the people who won it. They may be fine, but my view is, with 30 years of business experience, when you've got a really good provider who has done a very effective job, you've done a bidding process, and you found out that they're within just a few dollars of the other finalist, and they have a proven track record of cleaning up a really messy situation and turning the Oasis into a profitable and clean and good operation, that we should have stayed there. Now, I have no opposition to the fact that that went out to a bidding process. I do have a strong opposition to the Civic Center not going out for bid. Now, the claim made by the city administrator and one or two aldermen was, well, this used to cost us $500,000 or more, and now we only spend $70,000, and this management company takes care of it for us. Well, I have some significant problems with how the management company takes care of it. The claim was made that we should be happy because they've booked every weekend of 2012. Well, if you look closely at that, what you find out is that most of those are weddings and other parties. People going to a wedding aren't going to come downtown and start shopping on Main Street. The Civic Center, Festival Hall, Memorial Hall, and the jewel of a lakefront that we have should all be being used to attract major events. In my opinion, there shouldn't be a weekend that goes by in the summer that we don't have a major event going on. We have the Ironman Triathlon. Last year, that generated $1.5 million in revenue for the city of Racine. Those are the kinds of things we need. Weddings aren't going to do that for us. So I think that we should have had a request for proposal process. It's very possible that this provider, Venue Works, might have won on it. Okay, but we're not going to get the new ideas that caused the council to award the Oasis contract to somebody else if we don't go out for bid. It's possible that going out for bid would have given us new ideas and new approaches to being able to attract the big fish, so to speak, that we need at the lakefront.
Is there any policy on this, what goes out to bid and what doesn't go out for bid, or is this just up for grabs, whatever the aldermen decide?
By law, no contract can go to sole source without passing the council. So the council is in fact the watchguard for sole source contracts.
All right, so the council just oversees it, but the council isn't required by any policy to, after a certain amount, get a bid. They can say, no, we don't want to do this overbid for whatever reason. We like the way it's going now, forget it.
Well, I do not believe that there is a statute, but let's
How
consider.
about a policy? It just, yeah, even if there isn't a statute.
I do not believe there's a policy.
All right, so
Okay?
they can just arbitrarily, for whatever reason, because this one failed by 12-2. I think you had one person supporting.
That's correct.
Your motion and put it out for bid.
That's right. Alderman Caprillion Becker supported this.
Okay, and I was amazed because of all the rigmarole we went through with regarding the Oasis.
Well,
and I thought, how can they do this? Well, what's
Consider
the policy?
that policy on the whole bidding process and the whole contracting process is subject to general legal requirements. So, for example, if someone came in and chose to challenge this and say that that they felt that there was bias involved, or that we were favoritism
whatever,
to a
yeah.
particular vendor, or any of those kinds of things, those would all be subject to legal action. And in fact, if you go back, the current bus company that we use, First Transit, sued the City of Racine twice, about 10 years ago, roughly speaking, over what they felt were errors in the bidding process, and to the best of my knowledge, won on both of their claims.
But they went through a bidding process.
They went through a process, and they felt the process was unfair.
Okay.
So the same kind of in my opinion, the same kinds of rules would apply if you choose to no bid a contract, as if you bid the contract and it's unfairly done. It's all about the process.
So someone would have to come up and say, hey, I wanted to bid on this, or how about a citizen? How about someone like myself? Could I have gone in there and say, hey, I think this should go out for bidding. I think you should put out a, what did you call it, RFP, request for proposal, an RFP. Would I have had the right to do that?
You certainly would have had the right to argue
I would have the right
for
to do it, but would I have to have any, what do I want to call it, any meat behind it, any force behind it to say that you must do it once I demand it?
I do not know. I don't know if an individual citizen has the right to bring a legal action to enforce that. But certainly, I believe that the council would have listened if enough people had come down and said, hey, wait a minute, the Civic Center should be bringing business to town. Okay, I would have hoped that somebody maybe like Downtown Racine Corporation might have come in, or other organizations like that, and said, hey, wait a minute, before you just put this thing out there, weddings aren't helping our business. We need something that will really support retail business in this town, and we've got Festival Hall and Memorial Hall and the lakefront, and that's the jewel here. We should be using those to bring business into town.
Oh, right.
I'm not seeing that in the Venue Works proposal. Let's get somebody else in. But the fact is, no one came down, and you know, government is about citizens standing up. There's an old saying, and this is clearly an overstatement for this situation, but the statement is, the triumph of evil occurs when good men fail to stand up. And this is one of those situations. You know, if the people of the city don't care or choose not to stand, either by physically coming down to a council meeting, or sending their alderman a letter, or by sending the city clerk a letter and asking that the letter be distributed throughout the council, that's how citizens get heard. And it is absolutely critical, because every time I have seen the citizens step forward, virtually every time, and make their case, the council has listened.
Well, the only thing I would say on that is that when I've seen those cases, it's generally because of some specific thing that has affected people very closely. For instance, the church being moved from Douglas Avenue and various things like that. For us to be watching when this bid comes up, we don't know that. As I recall the council meeting, the main objection to putting it out for a proposal was that no one had come up during the year, whenever they were supposed to, and given an offer or said, hey, I want to bid on this contract. I mean, I don't know how the world could be watching our calendar or our schedule of contracts to come up and know when to come in and make a bid like that. To me, it was totally superfluous, silly type of objection, but it just seemed to carry the day. how would anybody, citizens, anybody know to come up and in a timely fashion come up and say, we think this should be bid out?
Well, they shouldn't, and they shouldn't be required to. The two primary arguments that were made for going to sole source on this were, number one, VenueWorks is doing a great job, so why upset the apple cart? They're booked all the way through the end of 2012. Well, the argument there is the Oasis people were doing an excellent job too, and we didn't seem to have any problem putting that out to bid. Plus, there's a real question as to whether VenueWorks is really doing that great a job if the majority of the bookings are weddings and parties, because they don't draw business to downtown, and that's what we should be doing with our Civic Center. The second argument was that VenueWorks just hasn't been doing it long enough. Okay?
That's right. That was another argument.
And that Oasis had the contract for, I think, about 10 years.
Right.
Well, I don't think we need to wait 10 years to find out how somebody's doing. That in my mind is not a good policy choice. Now, the point that you raised was made by the Alderman of the 4th, Alderman Kaplan, who said, well, gee, I don't understand why this is a big issue. I'm paraphrasing him, because I don't see anybody pounding on our doors to get this contract. And then he specifically asked the city administrator if anybody had been pounding on our doors. The fact is that's not how public contracting works, and that's not how public contracting should work.
I didn't think so.
We should be looking out for the taxpayers and not waiting for people to come up and say, gee, I'd like to do that at the city. Would you be willing to put that out to bid for me? The fact is that is exactly the kind of work that our purchasing agent, Sam Aiello, does. He goes out and he finds people to send these requests for proposals to, and he does an excellent job, and he has kept costs down and brought innovative people in, because he's been able to go out, and there are a variety of different online sites and boards and things of that sort that cities can put these kinds of things out to, and people from anywhere in the country could in fact be bidding on it. So this should have been in fact a national search done electronically, and unfortunately it wasn't.
All right. Well, and as I recall at the budget hearing, we are still, unlike the Oasis, we are still putting money into the Civic Center from the taxpayers to pay all the bills.
Well, we're still paying to do repairs. We just, Public Works Committee just reviewed a major contract having to do with Memorial Hall. So yes, we're still
putting money. As compared to the Oasis, we're getting money out of it each time. So we took somebody who's paying us money at the end of each year,
right,
and put that out for contract, but someone that the taxpayers have to chip in, we didn't.
That's correct.
All right. Well, I don't know. I just object to it.
What I find is that if you want to look at great political philosophers of our time, okay, instead of looking at people like
Jim Kaplan again,
instead of looking at people like John Locke and the other political philosophers we traditionally consider, when you look at the state of politics here, the appropriate philosopher would be Lewis Carroll, because what you're seeing is Alice through the looking glass.
Okay. All right. Well, on that, we'll take a break, and we'll come back and talk about the reestablishment of a full-time position over at the Finance Department.